Hello and welcome everybody to our training session today. Thanks for spending some time with us this morning. If you've been coming to these weekly, thanks for coming here again. I hope you found these valuable. We have been enjoying doing them and hope to continue doing more of them. I'll give everybody just 1 minute. I see everybody joining in here in the attendee chat. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. I'm sure you will find this valuable, especially if you are an admin and use ELD. We are going to be talking about all the things you need to know today. I see everybody putting in the chat where they're from. I'm in Las Vegas, so it's first thing in the morning for me. I hope you guys have, if you are in the morning also, you have your coffee and you're ready to go. My pro tip for today is always, pull up, if you have another screen, pull up MyGeotab, kind of follow along with the sections that we're talking about. I always find that really helpful to kind of see in my own database, what's going on there. So Dean says he's 3 coffees in, so he is ready to go. He is awake, alert, and ready for this. All right, so we'll get started here. Thank you for joining our session for ELD for administrators. If you're an admin, you will definitely find this very valuable. If you have coworkers that are maybe stuck in a meeting or unable to join this morning, no worries. This is going to be recorded, and we will send a link to everybody that registered. So even if they didn't register, you can send that link to the recording to them so they can watch it. You can watch it back and review the parts that maybe you were distracted during, or if you got a call midway through. No worries, it's all recorded. The deck will also be shared with you, and any questions that we get throughout the presentation, we will put into an FAQ document so you can review all those questions that were asked, all the answers we gave. So please ask any questions as we go throughout this presentation. Use the Q&A function. If you put them in the chat, we might miss them in there, so please use that Q&A function. We'll get answers to all the questions. I'll be answering questions throughout the presentation. I'll try to get as many in there as possible. If we have time at the end, we'll try to do a couple questions for Lisa to answer for us today. But we will follow up with answers to every single one of those questions. I know a lot of questions come up around ELD that kind of border on legal advice. So just be aware of the type of questions that you're answering. Some things are difficult for us to answer just because of the compliance aspect of things. But we will do our best to show you exactly how the technology works and how we can support you in using Geotab for ELD as best as possible. So without any further ado, let's welcome Lisa onto the stage. Thanks for being here, Lisa.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm glad to see everybody introducing themselves in the chat. My name is Lisa Boskovic. I'm a senior training specialist here at Geotab, and today I am going to be doing my first of a 2-part series on the HOS ELD compliance at Geotab for administrators. So we're going to focus on the day in the life of someone who's managing HOS drivers, and how they will look at driver availability, unidentified driving, managing logs, like adding logs, ignoring logs, HOS violations, what they are, how we can avoid them, and then all the different kinds of reporting that we can do to monitor these pieces of compliance for those regulations. So before I dive a little deeper, here's just a little background about me. I am based in sunny South Florida. So I consider myself flow grown. I am a graduate of UCF in Orlando, but I currently live in the Fort Lauderdale area down in the Southeast. Before I came to Geotab, I was an educator. I taught 8th grade U.S. history and then also was working at FIU online in Miami, working on their e-learning content. And then before I went into that, my side hobby is performing arts. I did a lot of musical theater. You can see some pictures of me in Xanadu and Into the Woods are those particular pictures. And then on the personal side, I have a daughter. She is 9 years old, going on 19, if you know that age. And my last name there is my married last name. My ex-husband and co-parent is from Eastern Europe, from Serbia, and actually works in the trucking industry. So I did get to hear a little bit about all of the ELD mandate madness when that was coming into play, like in the 2016 era. And that was a picture of our daughter going to a trucking show with him. So that's just a little background about me. I've been with Geotab for coming up on 5 years now. And thank you for the greetings and noticing that I have my Geotab Drive earrings in. That was a colleague who printed those out for me. I wish I could give them out as like swag prizes for those of you who are attending. But yes, very glad to see all of you. And let's start off with getting to know you a little bit. There are no wrong answers to these poll questions, but I want to know, how much do you currently know about ELD? Whether it's, not a lot or too much. Hopefully you'll get something out of our session today. It looks like there's a lot of you who are really knowledgeable and have some basics. Not too many of you are clueless. It's okay if you are. There's a lot to compliance. I'm going to try and get through a lot of it from the admin perspective today. And there's a couple of folks who can write those sad songs about about HOS, which is cute too. Let's see about my next question here. How many drivers are you managing with the HOS regulations? Again, no wrong answer here. We got some big folks. We can manage fleets of any size. I know I do. When I'm not delivering webinars, I am training our end users and also our partners at Geotab. And I know whenever I have a customer who needs to do compliance, there's always a lot that it entails. I usually have to do a couple of sessions with them to cover all of the basics. Looks like we got, a good spread between smaller, medium, larger size fleets. So thank you for giving me an idea of who out there is in this audience. We have over 300 of you here, which is amazing. And my last question, right here, my last poll question before I get into the content is, which struggles do you have the most when you're managing your ELD HOS? Drivers logging in and out, avoiding violations, doing inspections. Could be all of them. I had a feeling all of the above was going to be one of the most popular answers, and so far it overwhelmingly is. Over 70% of you so far have said about all of the above, and I get that. The struggle is real. So we'll hopefully try and make it a little bit easier for you. Again, today's more of the admin side, but next week I'll do the driver facing part of compliance as well. So let's start with a little something that's a little bit scary when we talk about violations. So if your drivers are stopped for a roadside check, there's a 1 in 5 chance that they're going to get a violation when that officer is reviewing their logs. And these can vary in terms of how much that violation is going to cost. Somewhere between $1,000 to $10,000, over $10,000 if it's particularly egregious, which I know sounds scary. But the good news is that when you're using Geotab, it can help you avoid those costs and protect your business. When I work with compliance, I mention all the time, I'm one of those weirdos who actually likes talking about compliance. But that's because it can be really daunting for a lot of people. And I like to try and help ease their worry and let them know that this is something that is easier to do. Geotab is simplifying the compliance process for you. Just like doing your taxes and getting the fear of getting audited by the IRS because you're not an accountant can be really scary. A lot of us go online and we use tax preparation software to help make it easier for us to avoid any problems complying with taxes. So that's what Geotab is doing for your DOT regulations or DOT compliance with hours of service and the ELD. Let's do a little bit of history here about hours of service. I'd just like to level set and make sure everyone's on the same page. I know a lot of you are really experienced, but some of you who are just beginning, I like to just remind you that hours of service, HOS, has been around for a while. In the US, it started back in 1938, and then Canada followed a little bit later. And these are the regulations that monitor how many hours our commercial drivers can safely operate vehicles before they need to rest. And we'll go more into the rule sets later, but we've been monitoring hours of service using paper logs. If y'all remember paper, that's what it used to look like. And there are still some instances where if the technology is briefly malfunctioning, your drivers might want to switch over to the paper logs. But now we have the ELD, the electronic logs. And the ELD mandate came into effect in the US around 2016, 2017 is when it went into full effect, and then Canada a little bit later, where now you're required to do this record keeping electronically. And there's a lot of benefits to that. One of them is just like human error. If you're like me, I tend to procrastinate. And if I were driving and waited until the end of my shift to try and remember when I had done all of my breaks and all of that required stuff, I might not be totally accurate when I'm keeping those paper logs. And then on the other side, there have been historically people who would get a little creative when trying to write their paper logs. And ultimately, that would lead to unsafe driving behavior, because the reason why these regulations exist is for driver safety. If you have been operating a vehicle for over 20 hours without sleep, you are effectively operating that at a level as if you are drunk, as if you had a BAC of 0.08. And so me and you driving on the road with a commercial driver, we don't want that driver to be operating that heavy motor vehicle unsafely, maybe fall asleep behind the wheel and rear end us as we're driving our kids to school or whatever the case may be. And so that's the reason why. So even though it can be cumbersome, I like to mention that there's an important reason behind it of us keeping track of these hours. And then you'll notice at the bottom of this slide, I do have a disclaimer that I do in all of my compliance presentations, mentioning that I am here as a Geotab employee to give you technical advice of how to use the ELD to comply with the HOS regulations. If you ever have questions about which rule sets you need to use or how to comply, or if you need to comply, you take those to the regulatory agencies in your country. If it's the US, it's a branch of the DOT called the FMCSA. And in Canada, it's a branch of Transport Canada called the CCMTA. So those are the folks that you can reach out to for legal advice, but I'm here to talk to you about how to use the ELD to comply with those HOS regulations. So what is the Geotab ELD? ELD stands for Electronic Logging Device, and it is a three-part system. The first part is our hardware. This is our Geotab Go device, a black box that's installed inside your vehicle, and this is doing all of the automatic data. So this is one of the great things about the ELD is that when that vehicle's moving more than 5 miles an hour, it will automatically put the driver in the drive status. And so the driver never needs to worry about pressing the drive button, because that black box is going to do it based on the activity of the vehicle. So when the truck's moving 5 miles an hour, automatically goes into drive. When the truck is stopped for 5 minutes, it automatically switches them to the on-duty status. So on duty and drive are automatic status changes. They never have to manually go into those statuses because it's based on the activity of that vehicle. A really important thing to remember, and especially when I train my drivers, I remind them of this, is that when that ignition is turned off in the truck, it will automatically put the driver in the on-duty status. The system will never, ever, ever automatically place a driver off duty. Off duty is only a manual status change that is done through the second part of our ELD called the Geotab Drive mobile app, which is the icon of my earrings that I am wearing. So when a driver needs to go off duty, they are going to press the button on that tablet or phone that says off, or they are going to sign out, log out of the app in order to go off duty. So my second presentation next week is going to be focused all on the Drive app. But it is a part of the whole ELD as a whole. So the Go device for automatic data, the Drive app for manual data, and then it all goes into the third and final piece, which is MyGeotab. And this is where our admins that I'm going to be focusing on today manage all of their driver information, track them on the map, and can pull up their logs and make any edits there in our cloud-based system, MyGeotab. And I'm often asked the question that what would happen if I don't have cell coverage? Because a lot of our commercial drivers are long haul, crossing the country and state and province borders. And sometimes they may run into dead zones where there is no cellular connectivity, which is how the data is being transferred to the cloud from the Go device and the mobile app. The good news is that there is internal memory, that it is still time-stamped, logging all of the information. And as soon as they go back into cell coverage, that is when all of the information will be visible in MyGeotab. But even if a driver is stopped for a roadside check and they do not have cell coverage, they are still in compliance because the officer will be able to review the required RODs or records of duty status on the driver's device, even if they are outside of cell coverage. So that's my quick overview of the HOS regulations and the Geotab ELD system, that three-part system that we use to comply with those regulations. And so now on to the meat of everything. We're going to look at the day of a life of an administrator, an HOS administrator. Her name is Sarah. She's very busy like the rest of us, trying to maintain all of this compliance and safety, looking at those CSA scores and making sure all of this can be accomplished in an efficient way. So when Sarah starts her day, where she's going to do a lot of reactive cleanup, making sure drivers have availability. Then later on, she's going to do deeper dives, looking into some things like unidentified logs, unverified logs, monitoring on the map midday, trying to see how many hours her drivers have, where they're located. Maybe later on in the afternoon, there could be some special circumstances. Maybe if her drivers are crossing the border between the US and Canada, what can she do to manage that? What can she do if a driver forgets to log out? Because that is the number one issue that our customers, our ELD customers, contact Geotab about is, what do I do when a driver forgets to log out? It happens all the time. I'll talk about that today. And then the last one is future-proofing, being able to use some of our marketplace add-ins. I'll be talking a lot about our Geotab Marketplace add-ins, which are free to install in your databases and can really provide extra convenience for you in managing your HOS drivers. And with that, let's go ahead and start her morning, Sarah's morning. Here she is at 8 a.m. and the first thing that she sees on her dashboard is unidentified driver logs. She already has dispatch calling and asking which drivers can pick up certain loads, who has time. So what is she going to do to manage this situation? Well, one of my favorite pages in here that a lot of customers don't always know about is this driver availability screen. So you'll see the click path that you have in MyGeotab to find this page. Everything that I'm going to be talking about today can be found under the compliance menu item and then the HOS drop down. And this particular page is called driver availability. And you would put all of your HOS drivers on this. You can manage it on one screen, and then you'll be able to see, what their current status is. Are they on duty, driving, or off duty? Which vehicle are they in? Which rule set are they on? What is their location? Do they have any trailers attached or shipments attached? And how much time do they have available in their different HOS limits, like their workday limit and their driving limit? And then you'll notice as well, there's this color coding up here as well, which is handy to keep an eye on as your drivers are approaching violation. And I will talk about some other notifications and alerts that you can get when drivers are getting close to those limits and approaching violation. So this little exclamation point icon will change colors as they are getting closer. Green is 2 hours or less. Gold is 1 hour or less. And then red is urgent. It means that they are within 30 minutes of their limit, and you're going to want to figure out how to get them to stop driving and not get into a violation. Now, this little shish kebab icon to the far right of a driver on this availability page brings a drop down right here where you could go directly to that driver's logs page. You can send them a message within the Geotab Drive app. You type the message in MyGeotab and the driver will get an alert in their Drive app so that they can see it. You can look at their location live on the map. You can look at their cycle recap, which is, depending on whether it's a 7, 8 day, 14 day cycle. They have certain restrictions within that, and you would see how much they have going in ahead, how much they've used in the past. And then the last one on this drop down is to view their violations. Hopefully they don't have any, but if you did, you have a single page where you can go for that individual driver. And there is at the top of this driver availability page a reload button. So I know a lot of customers who will have it open on a separate monitor or a separate screen so that they can always keep a glance of what their drivers are doing at any given period of time during that day. Now here's my first Geotab Marketplace add-in. It is called the HOS Driver Summary, and it's another good option if you prefer to take a look and see if they have any violations, if they verified their logs, if there's unidentified logs for that driver, and then also some of their exemptions. PC here is for personal conveyance, YM is for yard move, how much of that they have used. I will talk a little bit about exemptions, HOS exemptions in this session, but the bulk of my talk on things like PC and yard move will be in my presentation next week. And good, yes, I see people are answering questions in the chat. Keep them coming. The other pieces here, pre-trip, post-trip, those are our DVIRs, the inspection, asset inspections. That's another thing that I'll go in more depth next week on the driver's side of training, but it is important for our admins to keep an eye on if our drivers are doing the things that they are required to do as an HOS driver using the ELD. Oh, by the way, how to get all of our Geotab Marketplace add-ins. You go to geotabmarketplace.com and we will have links and this presentation for you in the follow-up email to this webinar. So you just would log into with your database credentials, and if you have admin access, and you can install any of these add-ins. They are from Geotab. You know they're verified and they are free. Not all of our customers are so lucky to have to comply with the ELD mandate. So we don't build it into the system for everyone, but we give you the option to include these when you would like them if you see a benefit. So that's one of the things I like about doing this presentation is many folks aren't aware of these ELD add-ins that we have. So remember to check out the Geotab Marketplace to get more information and install the ones that you are looking for. Unidentified driving. This is a built-in part of the system. And what is unidentified driving? It could be either a driver who forgot to log in, or it could be a yard move or a maintenance move. Anytime that vehicle moved more than 5 miles an hour and created a driving log, but there was no one signed into the vehicle at the time, it becomes a ghost log. And we need to do one of two things to that. We either need to assign it to the driver who forgot to log in, or we need to annotate it as a yard move or a maintenance move. And this is the dashboard report that Sarah can look at and see how many unidentified logs need her attention from within the last week. Hopefully it wouldn't be as much as 1,700. I think I got this screenshot from a very large fleet, but it could potentially be that way. But the good news is that you can bulk annotate these and bulk assign them if necessary. If she sees this on her dashboard report, Sarah is going to go over to her HOS unidentified driving page. And like many pages in Geotab, the first thing it's going to ask you is, what is the date period you're looking for? Is it today, yesterday, this week, last week? And then which assets do you want to look at? Is it all of them, or are you just working on a particular truck that you know the driver forgot to log in? And then the really cool thing here on this unidentified driving page is there's an additional filter that you can use, which is attached to zones or geofences. And that's this one right here, probable movement within zones only, which is a probable yard move. If you have used this rule, it is a built-in rule from the groups and rules page in MyGeotab. It's called vehicle movement within zones. It is not listed under the compliance area of the built-in rules engine. It's under fleet optimization, or I believe is where it's located instead. And this is where if a vehicle is moving within a particular zone type, and you can assign that zone type. Here I've created a custom yard zone type. And then when I have this rule turned on, attached to my yard, and I create a zone around my yard, anytime that unidentified driving event happens solely within my truck yard, I can put this filter as yes, and then I can bulk annotate all of those yard moves at the same time. So this can really be an efficient way to manage bulk editing yard moves. So when I do my search on the unidentified driving page, it'll pull up a list. And this is a list of all of those ghost logs of all of the times that a truck has been moving without a driver assigned to it. And Sarah can look at it and say, oh, this is a 19-kilometer trip right here that lasted 20 minutes. This one right here is a 0.9-kilometer trip that lasted 3 minutes. So if I would have a guess just by looking at the distance that this was probably a driver who forgot to log in. If I needed to verify that trip, I click on this icon right here. That's our map button, and it takes you to the trip's history. And I can see, was this a vehicle moving across town? Oh, well, in that case, I'm going to go ahead and click on the edit button right here, and I'm going to assign it to the driver who forgot to log in. And then if I try to save it after I assign a new driver, it will not let me save anything without an annotation. What we'll see over and over and over again in terms of compliance is that I cannot make any edits without an annotation, without a written explanation of saying, why am I making this change? And so I would say, hey, this was Tom. He forgot to log in. And that's the annotation I would put. Driver forgot to log in. And then I would click save. But if I were to look at this shorter trip and I check on the map to see where the breadcrumb trail was, and if it was within my truck yard, so I don't need to assign a driver to it, then I click on the edit button, I leave it as unidentified, and in the annotation, I would write yard move or maintenance move or whatever non-HOS purpose that it was staying within that private truck yard that I don't need to have an HOS driver attached to it. Now, if I am assigning an unidentified trip to a driver who forgot to log in, when I assign that trip to them, the driver will need to verify that edit before it recalculates their availability. So this 20-minute trip, it will take that 20 minutes away from Tom, the truck driver, after he verifies the edit that Sarah, the admin, has made. So let's talk some more about verifying logs and what Sarah's going to be doing in the middle part of her morning. One of them here is checking to see if drivers remembered to log in. One of the required steps is a pre-trip inspection, and this is our built-in rule for pre-trip inspection missing within the rules page. And when I have that rule turned on, I can set up a notification from that little envelope icon right there that will tell me, hey, Tom forgot to do his pre-trip inspection. And that means he might have forgot to log into the app as well, because doing the inspection is part of the login workflow. When you create this pre-trip inspection missing rule, you can customize the grace period. If there's a previous time since the previous trip, you can put in that time or distance traveled. So that way they're not going to get dinged on this rule if they stop for, their required break and then they start driving again. They don't have to do an inspection every time they start a new trip. Usually it's just once at the beginning of their shift of their work day is when they'll do their inspection. So if I get an alert that someone missed their inspection, it could tell me that potentially they forgot to log in. Another option is one of those marketplace add-ins. This is a report that tells us anytime a driver goes or a vehicle goes immediately from off duty to drive. Which means that they probably forgot to log in. So that's another free solution from the marketplace, off-duty to drive instances report that can identify which drivers forgot to potentially log in. Now here's a beta page. You don't need to install this from the marketplace. All you need to do to see this page is to enable it from your beta features on your user profile. There's a lot of great beta features there for you to try out. And I recommend to all of my customers just to auto enroll in all of them. And this gives you yet another option to manage all of your driver's logs on a single page. So here I have the name of the driver and what rule set they're on, what is their username and their group designation, and then what is their current status? Is it on duty? How long have they been on duty? Is it driving? How long have they been driving? Are they using an exemption like yard move? And then if I click on the little time clock icon, it will pull up that driver's logs, and I can see at a glance the past 2 days if there's any violations. And then I can also filter their driver log graph from 7 days, 8 days, 14 days, maybe depending on their cycle. So I can get an overview of that driver's activity. And then I can also message the driver from that page. And I can also click on the detailed logs button and get a more in-depth view of their rods. Here is what would happen if an admin needs to add a manual log. I have the admin going to the HOS logs page, and there is an HOS logs button at the top. Here they select the date and time of. This would be if a driver forgot to log out and I need to add that manual off-duty log for a driver. I go in here and I say, okay, yesterday at 5 p.m. is when my driver was supposed to go off duty. And then I select the vehicle that they were in. Which driver was it? It was Tom. Tom gives me lots of problems. And then, of course, at the bottom, I'm going to write driver forgot to log out. And then, or to do a pre-trip inspection, whatever my explanation for creating that log. When I click the save button, it's going to say I'm making this edit, but it will not go into effect until my driver verifies that log. Drivers are required to verify their logs electronically. So this is their digital signature that they have. Oh, someone says it's breaking up. I hope not. Let me know, my folks, if it is. Okay, I still see me on my side. So, all right, clear over here. Whew. All right, thank you. So, unverified logs. So the drivers are actually prompted every time that they sign in and out of the Drive app to verify their logs. And when I train drivers, and I'll mention this again next week, I tell them just get in the habit of verifying all of your logs every time you sign in and sign out. It keeps it clean. You only have 14 days to electronically verify your logs. And an admin cannot verify a driver's logs on their behalf because, again, it's their own signature saying that this is my activity for my CDL. So an admin cannot do it for them. What Sarah, the admin, can do is monitor this report, the unverified logs report. And what it's showing, Sarah, is the past 14 days. And what she wants to see is all of this to be green. If they're all green, they are all verified. And then what she would see on this 14th day, if there are still 15 logs that are unverified, you can go to the shish kebab and download the Excel file of this report, or just click on the dashboard report and download it. Or if she has it automatically sent to her email every morning, she can see the full Excel spreadsheet, go to that January 6th, that 14th day, and say, oh, okay, this was Tom. Again, I need to pester him to go in and verify his logs because he only has 14 days to do it digitally. So it's been a busy morning for Sarah. She's just getting going, but she's hungry right now, so she bought her sandwich. And of course, it's one of those working lunches. She's going to sit there and check out her MyGeotab while she's eating her lunch. Speaking of, I will have some water. Now, this is yet another Geotab Marketplace add-in. This is called the Compliance Data Summary add-in. And this is a good option for Sarah if while she's looking at the map, at all of her drivers moving around, seeing where they're located, and she has a question about, well, how much time does Tom have right now? If she has this add-in installed, she can expand this panel to the right of the map with this little arrow, and it will show her driver's name, which rule set they're on, their current status, and what the vehicle is, give them a link to the logs and how much time they have available in each of those rule sets. So the compliance data summary, this is actually a link. When you get the presentation, you should be able to click on that link. It takes you directly to the page on the marketplace where you can install it to your database. Now, I promised I would talk more about rule sets. And here's my disclaimer again, that when I talk about rule sets, I am not going to be giving legal advice. I will never tell a customer which rule set they need to be on. And there are a lot of supported rule sets to choose from. A lot of it will depend on where you're driving. Is it the US or is it Canada? Are you crossing state lines and you need interstate federal rule sets? Or are you staying within a single state like Florida, and that would be an intrastate rule set? Depending what you're hauling, is it property or passenger in the US? That can change which rule set you're going to be on. There's a lot of nuances there in terms of which rule set you need to be on. If you don't know which rule set your driver needs to be on, reach out to the FMCSA or the CCMTA to get clarification on that. But when you do know which rule set your driver needs to be on, I recommend reviewing this. It's now a web page. It's no longer a standalone document, but it's the HOS rule set matrix where it gives you a full description of what the different limits are and how many hours they have on the different limits depending on which rule set they're on. That page is also very useful for describing HOS exemptions like personal conveyance and yard move, which again, I'll go into more detail next week on the driver's side of the training. But let's look at one very popular rule set as an example for what limits exist on a rule set. Very commonly, I see customers using the USA property 60-hour, 7-day rule set. The limits that exist for this particular rule set, the first one is off duty. And this means they are required to take 10 hours consecutive in the off-duty status. That is when they are supposed to be sleeping and get well rested so they can safely operate for their workday, which is the second consecutive limit here. That is a 14-hour window in which they can work, a combination of on-duty and drive time. So if you see here, in its simplest form, our consecutive hours, 10 hours off, 14 hours on. That is our 24-hour workday. So these are consecutive, no matter how much time they take on or off or break. That 14-hour window, after 14 hours, they can no longer drive that vehicle, or they will break the workday limit and get a violation. Now, in that 14-hour workday, they can only drive 11 hours. So the remaining 3 hours would be done on duty, or off duty if they want to. But the most important thing is that they only have 14 hours that they are allowed to drive in their workday, and they can only do actively 11 hours in the drive status. But they can't do all 11 hours in one straight shot. They are required to comply with a rest limit. and that says that they need to take a break before they hit 8 hours of driving. They cannot drive more than 8 hours without a qualifying break. And a qualifying break is a minimum of 30 minutes, which is a really important piece to remember, because if they only take a 29-minute, 55-second break, it doesn't count, and they have not met their rest requirement for this rule set. Remember that these limits may differ if you're on a Canadian rule set or an intrastate rule set or a passenger rule set, but this is a very common federal rule set that I see in the US, which makes sure that they cannot drive more than 8 hours without getting a minimum of a 30-minute break. Here's the good news too about using the Geotab ELD is it does all of the math for our drivers right on the app that we'll see next week, where they don't have to question, have I been on break for 30 minutes yet? They can see it right there on their screen. The last limit here I'm going to talk about is a cycle limit, and this is listed in the name of the rule set itself, 60 hours, 7 day. It means that they can work a combination of on-duty and drive time no more than 60 hours in a rolling 7-day period. So as long as they stay within those 60 hours, they can keep rolling that 7 days over and over again as long as they don't exceed 60 hours. If they need to get their full cycle back, they need to take 34 hours off duty consecutively, basically like a weekend off, and then they get a full bucket of hours back to them when they return to work. Violations. So violations occur if I don't stay within my rule set limits. And you can search the drivers who are in violation by going to the HOS dropdown in compliance and going to the violations page. I search for my drivers, or I select all of them. I can also filter through to see which of my drivers are only in violation, if I just want to target those and yell at them. Once I do that search, it'll give me the list of which drivers are in violation. Now, Sarah, the admin, can also monitor her drivers in violation with this dashboard report. It's built in. You just need to add it to your dashboard. It's called ELD Violations Breakdown Report. And that pie chart will show me here in green, it's an off-duty violation. They didn't take their required 10 hours. In orange here, that's their rest violation. They didn't take their required rest. So this is a good to be able to see which drivers are not sticking to the rules like they are supposed to. And again, like all of our dashboard reports, I can click on that dashboard tile and it will download the full Excel file that will show me a list of all of the drivers and which ones have which violations. Drivers are notified when they are approaching violation within the Drive app. They will get those notifications 2 hours before, 1 hour before, 30 minutes before, and immediately before. And I'll talk more about this. I have this exact same slide in my session next week. But again, this is just important for our admins to realize that if a driver said, oh, I didn't know that I was about to have a violation, I bet you did, because the app is programmed to warn you about that multiple times in bright red as you're getting closer and closer. But admins have the visibility to keep an eye on those drivers as well. I already showed you that on the driver availability page, it will warn you as the drivers are getting close. These are other marketplace reports that you can add that shows you when a driver is approaching their limit within 30 minutes or drivers who are already in violation. And we recommend you can update this every 30 minutes, check it out on your dashboard, and you can keep an eye on those drivers who are cutting it way too close. Now, here are some special circumstances. There's Tom, the driver. We'll see a lot more of Tom next week. And he's calling Sarah, the admin, because he's messed up yet again, or he doesn't know what to do. And one of the things that will happen is if Tom is driving in the US and he's about to cross over to Canada to do a delivery, What is he supposed to do? Because you need to be on the rule set for where you are driving. When Tom is in the US, he needs to be on a US rule set. When he is in Canada, he needs to be in a Canadian rule set. So if he crosses the border, he needs to switch his rule set over. If he doesn't have this add-in on the Drive app, he's going to have to call up Sarah and ask her to change the rule set for him. But if Sarah wants to make it easier on herself, she'll download this free add-in from the Geotab Marketplace, and she'll put which rule sets Tom is allowed to use. And there will be a button in the app where Tom can say, all right, now I'm in Canada, I'm going to that rule set. Now I'm in the US, I'm going to be on that rule set. There's some more complications with cross-border travel in terms of Tom needs to be aware of what the rule set limits are on both rule sets in the US and Canada to prevent going in violation. A very common one that I see is that in the US, you need 10 hours consecutive off duty, but in Canada, you only need 8 hours, and the other 2 hours can be floated around. So if a driver doesn't have their full 10 hours and they go because they were on a Canadian rule set and then they go into the US, there's going to be a violation because they didn't match both of those rule set limits across borders. We have more documentation and info on that if you are in the circumstance where your drivers cross borders. Now, here's my most common scenario that we encounter is a driver forgetting to log out. And anything that the Geotab ELD can and cannot do is because we are told it cannot. We are certified ELD in the US and in Canada, and those regulatory agencies tell us what our technology can and cannot do. One of the things that we cannot do is edit automatically generated drive logs. So when that vehicle moves more than 5 miles an hour and it automatically creates a drive log, I cannot directly edit it for accountability purposes. That truck moved, I need to explain why it moved. But here's the problem, right? If Tom forgot to log out of his truck and then overnight it was moved by a maintenance tech, that time that the maintenance tech was moving the log counts against Tom, and Tom's not going to be able to get his 10 hours of consecutive off duty as required because it's going to look like he moved the truck overnight, but he didn't. So what are we going to do? We're going to ignore that log that the maintenance tech made while Tom was getting his off duty. So on an automatically generated drive log, you will see this toggle switch that says yes or no. Are we going to ignore it? And of course, like anything else, if I say I'm going to ignore a log, then I do need to include an annotation for why I am ignoring that log. And also, like any other edits that we make, the edit will not take effect until my driver verifies it. So within the Drive app, the driver is going to verify that the log is being ignored, and then it will get grayed out in both MyGeotab and the Drive app. So it's like it didn't exist. But there will be an annotation visible so that during a roadside check or an audit, someone will be able to see that there is an explanation for why the ignore log feature was used. She's nearing the end of her day, and as Sarah's nearing the end of her day, what she wants to do is make sure that the rest of her days are going to go just as smoothly. And so one of the things, another Geotab Marketplace add-in that she has at her disposal is the ELD Settings Validator. I use this add-in a lot with brand new ELD customers with Geotab so that they can make sure that all of the required information on the driver profile and on the vehicle profile is present so that there wouldn't be any issues with digitally transferring rods in a roadside check, or that they would get a violation if they were audited because there's missing information like a DOT number or a driver's license number. This add-in will scan the system, the driver profiles and the vehicle profiles, and it will flag with an X anything that's missing information. In my screenshot, all of my DOT numbers are missing for my drivers. And that is something that I could bulk edit and put my company's DOT number for all of my drivers at the same time. When all of the required information is present, then the driver or the vehicle will not appear on the list in the settings validator. This is also good if Sarah is adding new drivers to the system, and she can go here and say, oh, this driver still needs to get their driver's license information in there, or so forth. So that's the settings validator. And then the last two reports that I'm going to be talking about here are about exemptions. And again, I'll go more into exemptions next week, but personal conveyance is basically moving that vehicle for personal use. So if they take that truck home and they need to drive it around town, but they're still in their 10-hour consecutive off-duty time, they can use personal conveyance so it doesn't count against their availability. And then yard move is when it's being moved within a private yard, within a private parking lot. So they can use yard move, and it counts against their on-duty time, but not their drive time. These exemptions are commonly abused, and the DOT and the CCMTA, they will be looking for patterns of abuse with your drivers. So it's good for Sarah as an admin to be proactive and install these marketplace reports to easily identify which drivers might be abusing those exemptions and using them excessively so that she can prevent potential violations or issues. Yes, you can use the bulk edit feature to add the DOT number to the driver information because the DOT information is the same for the entire carrier. So yes, you can bulk edit it, but you cannot bulk edit driver's license information because that is a unique field. And the MyGeotab platform will flag for duplicate driver's license numbers because they have to each be unique to that individual driver. That's a good question, Lynn. So just recapping and having an opportunity to look for any other questions that have come in here. We talked about driver availability, making sure that at the beginning of the day, Sarah can see how many hours her drivers have, if any of them are in violation, where they're located. Unidentified driving, if someone like Tom forgot to log in and there's that ghost log I need to assign to him with an annotation. Or if I've used our built-in rule for probable yard move, the vehicle movement within zones, and I can bulk annotate all of those unidentified driving events as yard moves. Then managing our driver's logs. If I need to add a manual log, if Tom forgot to log out at the end of yesterday's shift, or if I need to ignore an automatically generated drive log and make sure it doesn't count against a driver. Using that ignore logs feature. Managing HOS violations by knowing how I can get alerts as drivers are approaching their rule set limits. Also knowing that I have the driver availability page, which will flag that as well. And the HOS violations breakdown report on the dashboard. Again, any of these reports you can put on the dashboard or have them automated by email. And other ELD reporting like excessive use of exemptions like the yard move or personal conveyance exemptions, other marketplace reports that we have too, and add-ins like the compliance data summary. And don't forget that new beta page as well for driver logs. I would say turn on that beta feature, see how you like the new page versus the legacy page, and use the ones that are most helpful for you. And you're right, Kevin. Tom should be fired at this point. I think he's like the cousin of the boss or something. There's some nepotism that keeps him on board, and it is the bane of Sarah's existence. But what can you do? All right. So now that I'm done talking about the content, let me ask you two final poll questions. After this session that we've had today, how confident are you feeling about using MyGeotab to manage HOS ELD compliance? Hopefully there's been, some improvement. It's fine if you're still confused. There is a lot to it. That's why I usually do way more than just a single hour session. Like you're only just scratching the surface, and we're sticking really on the admin side of it. But especially after next week, I really hope you all attend next week as well to get us that driver side facing. training, and then it will give you an even bigger picture. And again, practice makes perfect. You can hear me talk about it all day long, but it's not until you're really in the thick of it that it'll really start to click and make a lot more sense. But thank you so much for those answers and for these emoji reactions. How about this? If you're going to go back and do one thing when you get back to your compliance managing in MyGeotab, are you going to set up your violation notifications? Are you going to install any of those marketplace add-ins? Schedule some automated reports? Audit your unidentified driving. Let's see what the most popular ones here. Yeah, installing add-ins. I'm happy to see that that's a popular one here. And unidentified driving. I really recommend that if you haven't already, create those zones around your truck yards and enable that movement within zones rule. It'll really help you save time when managing those unidentified yard moves. And then if you want to keep learning more, remember that our Geotab Academy is really wonderful to give you lots of videos, hands-on tutorials and online courses about the MyGeotab piece for compliance, and also on the Drive app side too. There are great resources that you can share with your colleagues and your drivers to help them learn more. So please remember that those resources exist for you 24/7, absolutely no cost. And with that was the presentation that I gave at Geotab Connect this year in Vegas. Hopefully you'll also be able to join us at Geotab Connect next year in Denver and get to experience more of learning live, actually live in person. But I appreciate you being here today in the webinar. We have 5 minutes if there are any questions that I haven't addressed yet.
Well, thank you for that presentation, Lisa. That was a lot of information, and I can see based on the questions, people were eating it up. So thank you for that great presentation. And just remember, next week, a lot of answers to your questions and just additional information that is critical to becoming a compliance pro will be coming at you next week. So I had one question that I know always comes up, and I don't know if you know the answer to this. But this always comes up, and you may have heard it before, but do you know if Geotab has plans to create Mexican rule sets for driving in Mexico?
I do not know.
Okay.
I do not know. Oh, you know something though I forgot to mention, because it has been a recent update that we're really excited about, is that, and I guess I'll bring it up next week as well, is drivers can now email their logs to themselves. They have the ability within the Drive app to email their rods. And that's a new addition that we're really excited about. But as for which new rule sets are on the horizon, I do not know. And again, that gets kind of into the gray area of like legal stuff that is beyond me.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I know that question has come up for a while, and hopefully one day we do get those rule sets. But thanks for your question, Paulette. I know it comes up often, so I just wanted to see if somebody else knew something that I didn't know. And with that, we had lots of questions. Thank you guys for all of your questions and participation. Thank you for staying all the way until the end of this presentation. We will get answers to all of your questions. There were quite a few questions that needed to take a little more detail to answer. I know you guys weren't going easy on us with the questions, but I tried to answer as many as I could. And we will follow up within the next couple of days with answers to all of those. You'll get a link to the recording of this session. You'll get a link to a document with all the questions that got asked and the answers that we gave. And if you're having questions, if you still have questions that you need an answer for right now, feel free, come to our community, ask those questions. We'll be happy to give you the best answer that we can. And like Lisa said, go check out the Academy. You'll be surprised how much you can learn by just, watching a few things in the Academy. And with that, we will let you have a couple minutes back of your day. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody, for your time. And we'll see you next week. Be here next week.
All right. See you next week. Bye. Thank you.
Have a good one.